Jane's output was phenomenal. In just 4 years, 3 books were underway: Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and Northanger Abbey, in which she wrote her famous defence of the novel.
A work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of its varieties, the liveliest effusions of wit and humour are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language.
Her characters bring out her wicked side. She scrutinises other people without forgiveness, but always with humour.
Other way, Mr. Collins.
Oh, Madam,
Come, Mr. Collins.
My dear cousin, I apologize.
Clergymen are self-important and over-attentive to their social superiors. Rich girls patronise and put down poorer girls. Parents are often stupid and usually wrong.
Oh, Mr. President, we are all wrong.
All flirtatious young men are a threat to unmarried girls, and the most dangerous beast of all is a handsome army officer.
Some of her portraits are so unflattering, one could assume she had a dislike for people in general. But she never ridiculed what was wise or good. Follies and nonsense, whims and inconsistencies diverted her, I own, and she laughed at them whenever she could.
Jane was careful not to set any of her novels in Hampshire, but it's easy to pick out some family resemblances in her characters. A touch of her brother Henry, for one, in her charming and unreliable young men.
She drew from nature, but whatever may have been surmised to the contrary, never from individuals.
But what came of this graft and toil? For women in Jane's day, writing was meant to be a pastime, not a profession.
My sister became an authoress entirely from taste and inclination. Neither hope for fame nor profit mixed with her early motives. It was with great difficulty that her family could prevail upon her to offer her work for publication.
Jane allowed me to read the novel she just completed. Well, it made such an impression on me that I decided to approach a publisher. I wrote to Thomas Cattle in London. Well, you have to butter these fellas up a bit. I even offered to pay for the publication. Declined by return of post. The novel he rejected was Pride and Prejudice. He missed his chance, the fool.
Allow me to present this young lady to you as a very desirable partner.
Pride and Prejudice would become one of the most famous and treasured novels in English literature. The stormy courtship between the headstrong Elizabeth Bennet and the stubborn Mr. Darcy is told with restrained but intense passion. The irony is that none of the romance Jane gave her heroines came into her own life, for neither of the Austen sisters married. In the spring of 1797, the terrible news came that Cassandra's fiancé, Tom Fowle, for whom she'd waited so long, had died of a fever in the West Indies.
Cassie behaved with a degree of resolution and propriety which no common mind could evince. As time passed, I encouraged her to consider other suitors, but she turned her face away from the world, determined never to consider marriage again.
Cassandra was only 24. For her it meant an early passage into spinsterhood. Jane was heading down the same path, as she showed no sign of finding a husband. Instead, their attachment to each other became the most important thing in their lives.
My aunts were thought to have taken to the garb of middle age unnecessarily soon. I recollect how they walked in wintry weather through the sloppy lane between Steventon and Dean. I remember their bonnets, because though precisely alike in colour, shape and material, I made it a pleasure to guess, and I believe I always guessed right, which bonnet and which aunt belonged to each other.
Jane turned 25 at the beginning of the 19th century. She had 3 novels under her belt, each destined to be a classic. She seemed on the road to success. Then, mysteriously, she stopped writing. This coincided with a disastrous upheaval in her life. While their daughters were away, Mr. and Mrs. Austen took the tremendous decision to leave their home in Steventon.
Jane was returning from a stay with friends, and I was eager to tell her the good news. As she came through the door, I said, "Well, it is all settled. Mr. Austen is to retire, and we've decided to leave Steventon and to go to Bath to live."
We were to rent a house there and spend our summers visiting the coast. James, our eldest son, and his wife were to take over the parsonage.
Jane's response to the news surprised us. She simply fainted.
Jane was traumatized at the thought of leaving her home. But Mr. and Mrs. Austen were elated at the prospect of their new life of leisure and were in a hurry to leave. They said it was to be the holiday of their old age. They had no idea the harm they were doing.
I was losing my home, my workplace, my routine, my books, my friends and neighbours. We were to turn our backs on the liberty and quiet of the country.
Cassandra destroyed letters from Jane at this time. It's likely they expressed her pain and anger at her parents forcing her to leave the place she loved.
I wonder that anyone should think I might betray my sister's confidence. Some things she wrote for my eyes alone. "Seize upon the scissors," she told me. I would never break her trust.
Some letters had the offending portions cut out. Enough survived to show how much she resented her brother James's impatience to move into the parsonage. He and his wife took over with indecent haste. Her possessions were seized or sold, her pictures, her books, even her beloved piano. Since her parents agreed to this, Jane was powerless.
The whole world was in a conspiracy to enrich one part of our family at the expense of another.